Let's start with a discussion about what healthcare management is and why you're studying it. So let's start with the question why. Why are we studying healthcare management? And there are many reasons why, but when you think about career paths, many of you are studying in a technical discipline. It might be pharmacy, it might be nursing, it might be pharm science, and that's going to give you a strong technical skills that should create opportunities for you, particularly at the entry level of an organization. But when you think about moving up in an organization or having a better understanding about how organizations function, then you need to think about management and leadership skills. And so what this course is going to do is to introduce to you some of the key ideas and tools related to management and to leadership. And they're not going to develop a high level proficiency in them, but they're going to give you an introductory foundation. And for some of you, you may decide that you want to continue to enhance your skills in this area, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to do that if you decide that that's in your calling. But I think for everybody who takes the course, you're going to find that the tools and the skills that you are introduced to, you're going to find both interesting and also very germane to your overall pursuits in your careers. So the next thing we should talk about is what you're going to learn in healthcare management. And there's many things that you're going to learn. You're going to learn about the basic functions of management. You're going to learn about the comparison between management and leadership. You'll learn about organizational culture, learn about how to improve quality, how to improve morale, how to motivate people, and the like. And again, don't want to mislead you into thinking that you'll leave the course being proficient in these areas, but you certainly will get a good understanding and a foundation that if you choose to, you can pursue in a lot more detail throughout your academic careers and beyond. So in week one, we talk about management and motivation. So we talk about the basic skills of management. And those basic skills include planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling, and decision-making. And chapter one does a good job describing what those things are. They're pretty fundamental things and are part of anyone who wants to manage people or manage organizations. The other thing, which really we don't delve into in depth in chapter one, but we will get into in the ensuing weeks, is this idea of motivation. What motivates individuals, and how do we as managers and leaders tap into that so that we can get the most out of our people and our organizations? So there's a long history of studying what motivates people, and you may have heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in your psychology courses, and there's certainly an overlap between psychology and management, and you'll see some of that play in as we go through the points in the semester. So that will be week one, and then in week two we'll start to talk about organizational behavior, because it's important for us to understand both the individual and the organization, because when you think about organizations, they're really they're a combination of the actions of the individuals within it. And sometimes organizations function at a high level and sometimes they don't. And a lot of that has to do with the management and leadership of the organization. So we're going to look at what drives organizational behavior. What are some of the things that may limit it or have it move in a negative direction, and then how do we turn that around? And then we'll talk about leadership, and it's important that we recognize that leadership is viewed as being different than management. So management is more about the tactical, getting things done efficiently, and working with people and through people. Leadership is more about setting the tone, creating a vision, and having people want to be on your team and want to follow the direction that you're setting. And so there's certainly overlap between leadership and management, but the thinking is that leaders and managers actually have separate and distinct roles in organizations, and so we'll examine that. And then we'll examine what it is to be an effective leader. What are the things that are expected among the people in the organization for someone to be considered an effective leader? So your credibility, your trust, your vision, your commitment, all these things are important. And we can't really break them down in scientific formula. A lot of times it's an art form, but there are some key attributes and variables that seem to be common among effective leaders and effective managers. And then we'll move on to this idea of strategy and vision. So if you think about any organization, whether it's a small one-person operation or it's a large multinational operation, it needs a strategy and it needs a vision. And so the vision and the strategy are this idea about where are we going and then how we're going to get there. So, and that if it's a one-person organization, the management of that is pretty straightforward because you only have yourself to worry about. In small organizations, it's a lot easier to convey and manage that strategy and vision. But in large, complex organizations, it can be very challenging. But nevertheless, we need to figure out, well, what is a strategy and vision and why and how do we develop it, and then how do we communicate it, and then how do we get everybody on board? And so that is something that we'll take a look at. And then the other thing that we need to spend, and I wish we had more than a week, but certainly we need to talk about is quality and safety. Because one of the essential things in any operation, but particularly healthcare, is the idea of high quality and safety. And the reality is that the U.S. healthcare system does not have a good track record in either dimension. So there are credible evidence-based reports that indicate that somewhere between 98,000 to some reports have it up to 400,000 people per year in the United States die due to preventable medical errors. And if you think about that, that's an astounding number. And if it happened in other industries, we'd shut the industry down without any question. So there's a lot of opportunity to improve the quality and safety in healthcare. And step one in that is to recognize that we have a problem, and we have a problem in the U.S. healthcare system that we need to at least understand. And then, for those of you who move on to operations management, we'll examine some of the steps that we might take to make it better. And then we'll talk about managing healthcare professionals. So when we talk about managing people, you may think that managing people is the same in all situations, but it really isn't. We have to consider a number of things. We have to consider the situation that we find ourselves in. We have to consider the skill set of the people, and some other variables. And so the healthcare profession is a unique profession, and each individual has a certain set of skills and attributes, and so we have to kind of look through what is it that we need to be aware of in the healthcare profession that will make us more effective in terms of managing both the individuals and the organization as we move forward. And a big part of any organization and a big part of management is understanding how teams work or how they don't work. And so we have to look at the components that in terms of how teams get organized and how they function, and then how we can make them work even better. And so then we might examine, do we want certain skill sets on teams, or are there other things that we want to think about when we put teams together? But at the end of the day, what we know is that in every organization, particularly every healthcare organization, it's a team effort. And so we have to understand that, and we have to train our people on how to operate effectively in teams. And then we'll take a look at ethics, particularly ethics as it relates to healthcare. So when we talk about ethics, we're talking about a higher standard, above and beyond our legal requirements. What are our ethical responsibilities to our stakeholders and our patients, and how do we go about ensuring that those things come into play? And then The last thing that we'll talk about during our 10 weeks together is this idea of the disparities that exist in healthcare, and what are they, why do they exist, and then we can mull over what we might do about it. But I think since this is an introduction to management course, we're not going to solve problems as much as we're going to open your eyes to some tools and some issues, and then if they are something that you have an ongoing interest in, then there'll be opportunities in healthcare management and other courses where you can delve into the topic in much more detail, and hopefully, if you decide, you can make a difference in these areas. Okay, so Chapter 1 is called an overview of healthcare management. And we look at some of the key issues here. We're going to look at what healthcare management is and the role of the healthcare manager. We'll differentiate between the functions, roles, and responsibility of healthcare managers, and compare and contrast the competencies of healthcare managers. So I'm not going to read through these slides, but I would encourage you to take a look at them. They're a subset of the Chapter 1 reading. And I am going to point out a few key things, though. So one of the things is the BLS, which is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, projects that there's going to be lots of opportunities in the healthcare profession for managers and others, obviously. And we can see that today the healthcare spending in the U.S. represents 18% of the gross domestic product. So we spend a lot of money in healthcare, and there's lots of opportunities to improve the management, efficiency, and effectiveness of healthcare. And so, so for those of you who enter the healthcare profession, some of you will enter in a technical field, others will enter in a more general field. In either case, you have an opportunity to move into management at some point if that interests you, and there's plenty of opportunities to to make a positive impact if that interests you. So the Chapter 1 talks about the fact that there's a need for management, but it's not just a need for management, it's a need for people who are trained and understand what the issues are that they're facing. And nobody expects somebody who comes out of undergraduate school or even with an MBA or some degree in management or leadership that you're an expert. But at least after taking a course in healthcare management, or even if you get a degree in management or an MBA or whatever, you at least have an understanding about what the issues are, and you know what questions to ask, because information becomes obsolete, but our understanding of the framework and the structure and the right questions to ask us is really what we're after here. So Chapter 1 talks about the domain of health services administration, and external and internal. So you can review that, and then they go through a definition of management. So the classic definition of management really is typically broken up into 5 or 6 sections. So it starts with planning. So every organization needs a plan of action. They need to know where they're going, and they need to make sure that everybody in the organization understands where we're going, right? So think about if you went to work and it wasn't clear as to what the objectives were, it would make it very confusing for everybody. So an organization, and the larger the organization, the more clear the plan has to be to everybody. And then things have to be organized. We need to organize the resources, the people, the equipment, the facilities, and so forth. And that's part of the management function. So we have to plan for what we need going down the path, and then we need to organize our resources, get our resources in place, and make sure that they're capable of delivering what we need. And so part of that is staffing. Certainly, it's not the only part of organizing and planning, but a key part is staffing, which is to find the right people, put them in the right jobs, make sure they have the right training. And then the aspect of controlling and directing. So controlling basically is, I have a plan, I expect to go down the path at a certain pace. So I have to evaluate on a regular basis, how am I doing against that? And so that's the controlling aspect. And the directing aspect really is to give leadership, to give direction to others, so that when we're not performing as the organization needs to, or we're not utilizing our resources efficiently and effectively, we need to step in and help the organization, help the people to move in the right direction. And then, of course, decision making. So some of you, may have worked in organizations, and one of the things that is imperative on management and leadership is to be able to make decisions. And it's difficult to make decisions in many organizations because we seldom have all the information that we want or need. So we have to make it based on the available data and evidence we have, and use our best judgment. And that can be challenging and difficult. But nevertheless, it is one of the key components of management, and one that that we have to make sure that we have a systematic way to do that. So another view of management is broken up into three sections. It's conceptual skills, interpersonal skills, and competency skills. So conceptual skills basically are your ability to analyze, recognize, analyze, and solve problems. So, in many organizations, that's a critical skill, right? So you're constantly faced with problems. You have to, first of all, recognize they exist, and then you have to figure out, how am I going to solve it? And, when you're dealing with people and moving parts, it can be very challenging. And another competency is technical skills. So, part of the technical skills is to understand, what the organization does and the people who work for you, what they do. But the other part is to have the technical skills of being an effective manager or an effective leader. And then interpersonal skills. So this is the ability to relate to others, communicate with others, get along with others, and to be able to build that trust and confidence that people are willing to impart their careers and their well-being with you. So that's another view. So so we have the planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling, and then we have the this competency view of what we expect of managers. And then in terms of the hierarchy and control, there are different ways that organizations can be structured. Sometimes they're structured vertically, sometimes horizontally. So vertically is a flat structure, maybe 1 or 2 levels of management, and so every manager may have 7 or 8 direct reports, or sometimes more. And one that's more layered, might have more layers of management, middle management, and the like. And different organizations are going to evolve in certain ways. That there's a movement towards flatter organizations, more vertical organizations, but it's hard to generalize about them. I think what you need to know at this point is not what is the right or wrong organization, because that will come later in your, if you continue to develop an interest in management. But what do we mean by vertical and horizontal? And then the other is a matrix organization, where you basically have 2 functions or 2 managers that you work for, one in the technical realm and one in a functional realm. So so that's discussed in chapter 1, and these are all basic definitions. So and then there's some discussion about teams and having how teams perform. And then there's this idea of succession planning. So succession planning is nothing more than if I have key managers who the organization relies upon, then he or she should have developed a plan that when he or she gets promoted or moves on, that there's an ability to backfill that person in a timely manner. And then stakeholders are basically people who have an interest in the organization. So it's certainly employees, it's patients, it's and it's also external stakeholders exist as well. So one of the big part of management is to understand who are the stakeholders, both internally and externally to the organization, and making sure that our organization is being responsive to the legitimate wants and needs of all the stakeholders. And at the end of the day, what we're really after is to ensure the high performance of the people in the organization. And high performance is something that every organization is going to measure differently, but the better organizations will have a set of key metrics. Sometimes they're called a dashboard or a scorecard, where they keep track of the major things that happen, or the major things that have to happen in that organization, and make sure that that the organization is continuing to achieve those things and also improve those things. So management is challenging. It's rewarding, but it can also be difficult, because you're dealing with a lot of different variables. But in any case, at this point, we want to make sure that you have a basic understanding of the definitions, and then we'll build on it from here.